So welcome to the Helix webinar series. Today's session is on best practices and tips for bulk event deletion in BHOM. Joining me today and presenting is Donny Shepherd from Premier Support. He is joined by Brendan Murray, who will be answering the questions in the Q&A if you have any. And we will have some time later on where we can go to the live Q&A if you've got anything you would want to speak to the team. Before we get started, just a couple of reminders for those that are new to Zoom. There is the Q&A section at the bottom. If you have those questions during the presentation and the demo, please put your questions in there and we will endeavour to answer them during, and then we have the time at the end where we can take them to the live Q&A. So I'm now going to hand over to Donny to get us started. Over to you, Donny.
Thank you, Sam. All right. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. My name is Donny Shepherd, and I'm a Premier Support Specialist at BMC. I've been at BMC for around 15 years. Today's session is related to best practices for your BHOM environment as it relates to event management. Hosting with me today is Brendan Murray. He is the Principal Solution Engineer at BMC, and he's the developer of this particular utility. If you've spent any time in the monitoring space with responsibility for maintaining a test and or dev environment, then you already know how quickly the environment can get clogged up with a bunch of events that are related to various testing scenarios in preparation for implementing the monitoring in a production environment. Over time, the environments just get messy. And so this utility is designed to help you kind of maintain and clean up that environment on a regular basis. The utility was written in Python 3. That will allow you to bulk close and delete groups of events based on whatever your selection criteria might be. Today's session will cover the introduction, which we're doing now, program features and prerequisites, environment setup, running the script, and then getting help in the script, how to go about that. And then finally, I'll do a quick demo of the utility itself. So programs and features. The utility can handle a large number of events, even into the hundreds of thousands. Not that there are many environments that get up to hundreds of thousands, but in the event that they do, the utility has the capability of handling those. It can filter by date, both beginning and ending, as well as slot values. So you can control which types of events that you decide that you're going to close and then finally delete. Slot values has filtering options for both including and excluding. So you can filter in or filter out, or you can use both in the same query. The include query, as its name suggests, just filters them in. And based on your mode of executing the script, will either close and or then delete those events. As noted, the utility requires Python 3.8 or later, and you'll need to install the requests module is a requirement. And in most environments, like in mine, I'm using a Mac. I had to manually install that module. It wouldn't import. And the same may apply to the config parser module in the event that you decide to use the event cleanup INI file. So that the script can execute against your Helix operations management environment more easily, the utility does include an event cleanup INI file, and I'll cover it in a little bit more detail in the demo. It has two tenant placeholders available for configuring two different BHOM environments, but at your discretion, you could add additional environments into your script if you so desired. As I said, the INI file is optional. It just shortens the command line variables that are required when executing the program. I would recommend using it. I do in my demo. The script requires an API user to be defined so that it can properly access the API endpoints in BHOM. And I'll cover this in more detail during the demo. Once you have the environment configured, you're ready to attempt the execution of the script. And the execution of the script has two modes. One's called simulation mode. The other one's called go mode. And they're somewhat self-explanatory. It's highly recommended that you definitely test and simulate your queries before you execute them in go mode in the event that you're deleting the events. You don't want to inadvertently delete events that you might want to keep. The utility, because it's written in Python, can run on either a Windows machine or Linux variants. I'm running it in OS X. And one of the options on Linux variants is to edit the script at the front and adding a shebang to where your Python is located. And I'll show you that in my environment when I go to the demo. The download of the utility comes with a user guide, but the application also has extensive help built into it. So when you're in the script, you just add a -h option, and it will provide the optional requirements for the command line sequences, depending on whether you're running it in simulate mode or in go mode. The command line options are explicit, so you do need to follow the sequence of how you're going to put the command line together, because they do require a specific order in their execution, and I'll cover that in my examples. Okay. All right, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and drop out of the slides. So let's start out with where do you get the utility from? BMC has posted a knowledge article on our community site, and you don't even necessarily have to be logged in to the communities. But if you go out and search for, is it possible to bulk close or delete a large number of events, and do a search, the first KA that comes up will be the one that contains the utility. I've already pulled it up in my environment, and basically it just briefly covers the zip file that's attached and what the utility is used for. Over on the right-hand side is where you'll find the BHOM event cleanup script, and you just download that file to your desktop and then explode it there. In my environment, I have the utility exploded here. And as I said, it comes with a BHOM event cleanup script user guide. The user guide is quite extensive. It walks you through setting up, configuring, and utilizing the utility. Brendan's done an excellent job and provided a great deal of detail in the document. So when you download it, first thing I would do is go through the document because it'll walk you through setting up your Python environment, getting everything configured, and then it walks through in great deal every one of the variables that are available and how to use them. He's also provided extensive examples within the documentation. I'm going to be using some specific ones for my environment, but you'll be able to leverage the documentation for your environment as well. When you explode the utility, wherever you decide to expand it to, it'll create an event cleanup folder as well as a log folder. And every time you run it, it will update the logs. And there is a debug option as well that just provides additional detail in the logs when you're trying to construct your initial query for include, exclude, whatever it is that you're trying to do. As I said earlier, the utility includes the event cleanup demo, the event cleanup INI file. And for this demo, I've just given you an example. Here are the two tenants that are available, the placeholders. And as I said, you could add additional ones and just reference 2, 3, 4, however many you decide to add. But it requires the URL for your BHOM environment, as well as providing a user access key and a user secret key. This is the environment that I'm going to be using. It's one of my test environments. And basically what I want to cover just briefly is user access keys. So I'm currently in the portal. In the portal is what we call the IMS, the Identity Management System. And when you click on users and access keys, all of these keys here are considered tenant level access keys. And when you create an access key at this level, you have to explicitly grant permissions to that access key. The other option that you have, which simplifies the process a great deal, is under My Profile, you're granted the ability to create 2 access keys. And I say you're granted the ability, assuming that whoever your tenant admin is has provided you the necessary permissions to create access keys. You will see that you can create up to 2. The access keys that you create here automatically inherit the permissions of the user that's defined in the IMS. In this environment, as you can see, I've got quite a few closed events. I've got a fairly large amount of open events. This environment is not regularly maintained, but one of the things that I did yesterday, just so that I'd have some events that I could work on, because this is also a shared environment, and so I can clean some stuff up, but I can't clean it all up. So I did create a group of about 1,000 test events. And you'll see when I run my simulation and then go mode that we'll close these out in this environment. So what I did is I created just a quick text document so that I could walk through the various different scenarios that you're going to be going through as you build out your commands. In the event that you opt not to use the cleanup INI file, in your script, you will need to edit this import config parser out so that it doesn't try to import it and doesn't try to look for it because it is part of the script. I do recommend that you use it, but in the event that you opt not to, just make sure that you comment that out by putting a pound in front of that. In my environment, as stated, because I'm running a OS X, so I've got a Linux variant. This is where my Python is located, and so that's what I added to the top of the script here so that I could execute the commands without having to provide command line options. I'm sorry, not command line option, but file locations. When you're constructing your query, as you can see, this command here and this command here are the same command. The only difference is I'm not providing the arguments for the environment, the access key, and secret key. They're coming from my cleanup INI file, and I'm using tenant 2. I have 2 configured. The one that I'm currently in that I'll be using it against is my tenant 2. I'm running this particular command in the simulate mode, which you'll find here. The -I argument is what is it that I'm going after? And in this particular query, it's going after open and any events that have a severity of major and or critical. And I shouldn't say and or, it's or critical, but you have your and or options available to you. The operation that I'm going to be running is close. And then my recommendation is to create a simulate file that kind of matches the selection criteria that you're going after. So in this case, I'm going after severity, major, or critical, open. And I might even add, sim to tell me that this is run in simulate mode, so that I know I've run the simulate, and then if I do decide that I'm going to run it in go mode, I would just copy the command. I would change the sim to go, and I might change the target file so I can see all the events that were cleaned up. Okay. As I said earlier, the sequence that you add the command line arguments is important. So, for example, if I wanted to enable debug mode, which I can do, and I've done it in this one, you have to add it after you provide the environment arguments, secret key, access key. Otherwise, it'll give you an error when you attempt to run it. As I said yesterday, I did create about 1,000 test events. And so this query that I'm getting ready to run is I'm going to run it in simulate mode first, and it's going to create an INI file for me. I'm sorry, a CSV file for me. I'll go ahead and copy that. And just so that you can see, I do have version 3.12 of Python installed, and both the request and config parsers. So the other thing that the utility does is it tells you what it's going to do, and then it asks for you to respond every time, regardless of whether you're running it in Go or simulate mode. It'll always ask you to confirm your selection. So the file that it created was called all events sim 032425. So when I click here, there's my file. And so this lists all the events that met my selection criteria for this particular run. And some of these events are already closed. Many of them are open, but it picked up all the events that met the selection criteria. In this case, because I went after a date, it picked up anything that met the date requirements of 324, beginning and end of day. Okay. This time I'm going to run the same command, except for this time I'm in go mode. Same criteria, and I did change the name of the file. So when I execute it, and I've got an unrecognized argument in it. What did I do?
Tony, I don't think the SF argument is allowed in Go mode. That's SF is simulation file. So you,
Okay.
yeah.
Let me take that off. Thanks, Brendan.
Sure.
I never did add it yesterday when I ran it in Go mode, so let's see. And it's complete. So now if I go back and I check my events, they're all now gone because we've closed them out. Okay. If I run the same commands for deleting these events, oops, went to the wrong screen. And because I'm using the same file name, it's going to override the existing file. It's the same, it's the same events, but now it's showing me that they're all closed. Oops. And assuming this won't work either, so we'll take that off. And we're going to run it again. And this time we're going to be in Go mode. And now it's deleted all of my events that were flagged for deletion in that date and time range. So if you saw the counts slightly went up between the initial run and the second run because I still had events that were in there that were already flagged for closed. So now it deleted more events that were already closed. So the utility is as granular as you want it to be when it comes to the inclusion or exclusion of the types of events that you're going after. So in this particular, so I just listed a few examples of content. If I run the event against all closed events that are in my environment, it'll create that simulation file for me, and it runs fairly quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that and run it. Let me just make sure that that one is in simulate mode. Up. And so we got 26,000 events that it found. And if I go here and look, that file is about 4.7 meg in size. And there's a list of all the events that are currently in a closed state in my environment. And now what I could do is use this file as my example of, okay, what events am I interested in getting rid of? instead of, doing a carte blanche, I can now delete all of these if I wanted to. All I have to do is change it to delete go, and it would delete them all. But it's a quick example of how you can get an output of all the events and take a look if you're looking for a specific target of events that you're going after, or a particular type of event, like a particular class of an event. I believe down here I've got some SNMP traps. It's a big file. Let me just do a quick search. There we go. So if I was interested in just this class of events, then I can just create a query just for that class of event. And in my case, if I ran it in this environment, I'd see that I have 15,000 closed SNMP trap events. And it would be very quick for me to change that to a go mode and clean up all those closed events in my environment. So that kind of covers what I wanted to cover as far as the execution. Show you the simulate mode and the go mode. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my slides.
We have a lot of reference points, so there's a couple of key areas that we've put into this slide. Don't worry about taking these links. We will be sharing these slides out with you post-event. There is a YouTube channel. We've also got community pages. And for those that are seasoned at coming to a lot of the webinars that I co-host with other presenters, we also have our webinar page on communities. So if you are interested in these topics, we are looking to get some more BHOM content. We regularly run a webinar for AI Ops. Those are on a monthly series. So there's a lot of really good content out there, and we're really keen to hear from your feedback. So if there's anything you're missing in some of your migrations, areas of concern, then feel free to fill in the survey, which will come out to you post-event. I do read all of the comments that come back, and we try to get that content in. The other final slide we're just going to move to before we get to Q&A as well is a lot of reference points here of all the past webinars that I've run with You're On Front, one of my co-hosts for the AI Ops series. Some of this content will be very useful. Brendan is also a seasoned professional coming to some of these sessions and also presenting. So I have made it really simple with the Q&A slides, recording, and some recommended education. Again, you can find that also on communities on our webinar page. We've got also other content that's come from various different independent webinars as well. So hopefully this will be useful. Hopefully this content today that Donnie has shared has been useful for you today. I'm now going to get us over to the Q&A to see if we've got any questions. I don't see any in the Q&A section at the moment, so Brendan's had it very easy today. But we're just going to open it up for everyone to see if you would like to ask us some direct questions. And why we're doing that, I guess I'm going to just ask Donnie, is there any call to action or some feedback or just some tips for our audience today?
Well, I think one of the questions that some of the people may have is the utility supported? And I mean, we wouldn't take the time to produce this kind of video content if we didn't feel like it was of value to our user community. And so as far as from a supported perspective, it is a field developed utility. Brendan has written it and is available if we identify some kind of a defect in it. It may take a few weeks or something to resolve it, but I'm sure working together we can resolve any situations that we might find out there. But if necessary, you could open a case. We do have the KA available for it, and we're not going to go into, programming Python for you, but we will try to see if we can't resolve whatever issue you might encounter.
Thank you, Donnie. And Brendan, was there anything else that you wanted to add?
I guess the only thing I would add is the utility is designed to handle very large volumes of events. So we have had a couple of customers who, for one reason or another, have ended up with hundreds of thousands of events that they needed to get rid of in their environment. And I have tested, I think there's some, in the user guide, there's some scalability testing results. So I've tested with very large numbers of events. The key, if you are trying to delete or close very large numbers of events, like over 100,000, there are a couple of tuning parameters that the script has. One is limits how many events it will try and operate on at a time. So you can control the page size, basically. And so you may need to make the page size smaller. More importantly, you may need to increase the wait time between close operations. So the way the script works, it uses the pagination feature of the Elasticsearch API. So it'll say, here are the events that I want. And then Elasticsearch will say, oh, we got too many of them to give them to you all at once. So here's the first batch, and that's called the page, and then it's limited by the script to a certain size, depending on whether you're doing a delete or a close. And so it'll just keep on paging through that result set until Elasticsearch says, okay, there's no more, you've got everything. Between each delete and close operation, you may need to have the script pause a little bit and just give BHOM a chance to catch up. And so I think the default wait time between close or delete operations is 5 seconds. If you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of events, you probably are going to need to increase that. I've found 20 seconds seems to work pretty well. You could try lowering it down. Obviously the script is going to take longer to execute the more wait time you put in there. But as long as you have those tuning parameters set correctly, you should not have a problem deleting hundreds of thousands of events. The other thing to be aware of is the query syntax, and this is explained in the user guide. The query syntax is Elasticsearch query language, which behaves a little differently than you might expect. For example, it's primarily doing contains type searches rather than searching for equivalents. So it's explained in the documentation, and there's a link to the Elasticsearch query documentation. So just be aware of that the syntax is a little bit different from other query languages you may have used. And it can throw you off initially if you're getting results that you're not expecting for your queries. So yeah, that's about all I have to add.
Yeah, and if you go out to our BHOM documentation for the API endpoints, you'll find a section on the event endpoints for mSearch, and it also gives a few examples of how to go after data there as well. So along with the Elasticsearch query language, there are a couple of examples out there as well.